Welcome to Bridging the Bayou, where we will explore what it means to work, live, and play in the Bayou region. Join us as we take a deeper dive into the people and experiences that make our region such a special place to live and work. On each podcast, we will talk to individuals who are making our region grow and go, who are making strides in uplifting our community. This is a podcast of Fletcher Technical Community College. Welcome back to Bridging the Bayou, a podcast of Fletcher Technical Community College. I'm your host, Kristine Strickland, and I have the honor of serving as the Chancellor here at Fletcher. Today, I am joined by our very special guest, Dr. Nanny, our Vice Chancellor for Enrollment, Student Affairs, as well as Financial Aid. And we're going to spend some time talking to you today about probably one of the more important parts of enrolling at a college, which is the actual admissions, financial aid processes, as well as student life. How do you get involved in college campuses? So welcome. We are so glad you are joining us today.
Thank you. As one of your biggest fans of the podcast world, the Nanny family. We're all very big fans. So I am so excited to be here with you today.
Well, fantastic. Look, we start each podcast with what I call 5 in 5. So 5 questions, 5 minutes, to get to know you a little better.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, so let's do it. So I'm going to jump right in, and I'd like to ask you, do you have a mentor, or is there someone of significance in your career or even in your life in general who's played an important role? And tell us a little bit about who that is and about them.
That's a great first question. I have an answer for it. I was a little worried I might not have answers for your 5 and 5. So to no surprise, I would say you are you, and then Dr. Stanton McNeely, as you know, he's been a great mentor as well. And I say that I met you guys way back in the day, in the early 2000s. And you guys really showed me what it meant to love higher education. At the time, I had no intentions of working in higher ed. I was going to be an interior designer and had big plans for that. And that obviously fell through. And so having mentors in the space and those mentors getting me the right opportunities has been so impactful. So thank you. It is you.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I'm actually surprised and honored. So thank you very much. Wow. All right, question number 2. So recently, I reached out to each of our vice chancellors here at Fletcher. I am someone who believes in continuous learning. And so I emailed each of you and said, for Christmas, I wanted to get you each a book that you were interested in reading. And you selected a book. Can you tell us what the title of the book is? And maybe tell us, why did you pick it?
Absolutely. So I will tell you, I think I remember the title of the book. I want to say it was called Designing Your Life. Yep. And so I was recently fortunate enough to attend the Executive Leadership Institute. And it's an opportunity to learn what it means to be a leader, especially in higher ed, community college leadership. And it was a book that was recommended by one of the faculty who spoke at that institute. And it looks to both professional and personal life. And that's something, and I've heard you speak about this a little bit too. You know, we hear all the time, like, how do moms do it all? And I'd argue, how do dads do it all too? But that book in particular was really interesting because it did look at a balance. And it looked to how are we fulfilled in our work, in our play, in our just our professional development, all of those things. And there's actually a workbook during that session at the Institute. I put it in my Amazon box and I thought, I'm going to come back to this. There's a little workbook that goes with it. And then when I received the email from you, I thought, I don't even have to make something up. I have this here. And so, I'm really excited, and especially in the new year, as we go into the new year, kind of a fresh start and a fresh perspective on how do I balance it? Because I don't believe we can all have it all. I think, some wisdom you shared is when sometimes you have to focus more on work, sometimes you have to focus more on family. And I'm fortunate to work in an environment that supports that. And so just coming in and with a plan. I think oftentimes I start the new year and and I'm like, I have to create some goals for the year. This one I want to be a little more purposeful. So thanks for that tool.
Yeah, and that sounds like a really interesting book. I might borrow it from you.
Of course.
But I think, you hit on something so important. I say oftentimes that I don't believe there is such a thing as balance. I think if you try to pursue that, ultimately you're going to find yourself maybe disappointed time and time again because those are important, but a lot of times each one has a little bit more weight, depending on where you're at career-wise or family-wise or just day-to-day. And so just being really mindful of sort of that ebb and flow. And I love the word that you used, play, because I think as we get older, we forget to do that professionally. And that's a really important part of keeping, if you want to call it balance. So I'm going to pose another question that's kind of off the cuff. Okay. What do you do for play?
So I've always said, it's kind of funny that you asked this because I have always had such an old soul. And I've always said, like, the older I get, my body is finally catching up with my soul's age. And so play, I look at it and I'm like, oh, I'm so tired. I don't want to play. But I think it just depends on your definition, right? It's not necessarily like playing games. I have recently started watercolor painting. And I followed several folks on TikTok, right? I have no training in this. And they made it look so easy. And so I have this spot in my kitchen, just a countertop spot that's a little separate. And I have it set up as like my watercolor station. Cool. And I just kind of play around. My son Jude does it with me. I've even convinced my son Knox to do it with me. And I was able to create some Christmas presents. And it's something that quiets my mind, right? And there's a lot that typically floats around in everyone's mind. And for some reason, I'm just able to put in my little podcast in my AirPods, and I sit and I focus. And if you mess up, it's low stakes. Yeah. So it's easy to have fun doing that.
Well, fantastic. Well, I am glad you found something that you enjoy. I'm into crosswords right now. And I find them to be a little frustrating because I'm like, I think sometimes they make up the words, but that's okay. I enjoy it.
Good.
And so it gives my mind a break and it's relaxing. So tell me, what's your favorite thing about working at Fletcher?
Absolutely the people. Absolutely the people. I mean, the work is great, but the teams that we've created here, it's such top quality people who care, people who are in it for the right reasons. Our students are amazing to interact with. In my current position, I don't get as many opportunities to really engage with students. We have to create those, right? And so I'm really trying to create those meaningful opportunities with our students. But it's absolutely the people, the culture, the work environment.
Great. And I love to hear that. All right, last 5 and 5. What sparked your interest in higher education? You just mentioned you were thinking about going interior design, and you pivoted. So why?
Yeah. So right out of college, for my bachelor's degree in business, which I always knew for some reason I was going to open a business, an interior design business. Okay. I enrolled at Delgado Community College in their interior design program, and I loved it. It tapped into creativity and things of that nature. And while I was enrolled there, I continued to work at, it was Our Lady of Holy Cross at the time, my alma mater, but now it's the University of Holy Cross. And I worked in the business office there. And I always felt a great connection to the folks there. That's, like I said, where I met you and Dr. McNeely. And not long after finishing interior design, I worked for 2 interior designers, and they were great. I mean, they were amazing designers, but I found out really quickly my personality really didn't fit well with that particular field. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll work here at Holy Cross in the testing center until I figure out what I want to be. And I dabbled in, my husband's in education, my mom's in education. I thought, well, maybe I'll be a teacher. And so I applied at UNO for a master's program that would include a teaching certificate. I even got a scholarship. I was ready to go.
I didn't know that.
And I heard from someone about an opportunity at Fletcher as the director of admissions. And so I thought, I don't know if I'm ready for that. A director level position seems really high. I had some experience with the enrollment and recruitment piece at Holy Cross, and applied for the job here at Fletcher. And I got the job, and I said, well, I guess I'm not going to be a teacher. And so I say higher ed found me. I don't know that I ever thought this is what I want to pursue, but I really loved giving the opportunity, or helping, not giving, but helping students have the opportunity to proceed. I've always said I've been so fortunate to have a family who's been educated, right? I'm a third generation college student, and that's very uncommon for people. A lot are still first generation. And so I came from privilege. I came from that approach, and it wasn't until I came here to Fletcher that I saw that there's still I just assumed everybody went to college, It wasn't until I saw that there's this fear or hesitancy or expectation or lack of an expectation to pursue higher education. And I was given the opportunity to make a real difference. And so that's what locked me in. And then I went to pursue a master's degree and a doctoral degree. And so now I'm in it. I mean, I'm far enough in it to say I'm in it. This is my career. This is what I want to retire from doing. It's the way that I can make a larger impact. Decorating people's houses was fun, but it didn't make that big of an impact, So this is what I'm happy that I was able to find.
Well, I know we are glad that higher education found you.
Thank you.
We are very lucky for that. So thank you for the 5 and 5. Good to get to know you a little bit better. So now I want to talk a little bit about Fletcher and all the wonderful things that are happening here, as well as where we are going in the future. And one of the things you just touched upon, I think, is really a hallmark not only of Fletcher but of community colleges, and that is providing opportunities to individuals and families where maybe they don't have the higher education capital. So they are a first-generation student. And in many ways, we deal with a number of unique populations, right? We have non-traditional age students. I think last year we had a graduate who was in her 70s. We also had a graduate who was 16. And so there's this wide variety of students that we have the opportunity to serve. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you see Fletcher addressing the needs of all these really unique populations, and how does that impact the work that you all do when you're meeting with students who are in fact coming into the college, maybe for the first time having ever stepped foot on a college campus?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think back to when I was here in the capacity of the director of admissions position, I interacted with almost every applicant. And that was so eye-opening because I would have folks in their late 30s, 40s, 50s sit in front of me, scared, uncertain, maybe desperate. And they literally would say, I heard this question so many times, am I going to be the oldest person sitting in the classroom? And it was so easy to answer that question because no, the traditional student looks very different than it did, 20 years ago. And I think where we have a unique opportunity here in the community college setting is to make students feel comfortable. That there are going to be people here who look like you, who come from the same culture as you, who can bring a lot of the same experience as you. And sure, we do. We have those much younger or maybe older, on the older end. And so there's going to be an oldest student, no matter what.
True.
But I think that was always something I enjoyed telling them, that it helped them to exhale, with that worry. Now, of course, they still come with other worries. Am I going to make good grades? Am I going to understand the content? All of that is still a fear that they have to go through things but once they've gotten through the struggle of whatever, the test, the project, they see that they can do it. And I loved being able to be a part of kind of getting that started. So, that's one of my favorite things about the community college setting, something that Fletcher introduced me to, that I'm filtering down to my children. I have such an appreciation for the trades. I mean, my air condition breaks, that's $150 right off the bat that I'm paying to somebody, right?
Exactly
they just
right.
come and diagnose an issue.
Yeah.
And every time they leave my house, I look at my kids and I say, being an air condition repairman is a profitable, good, respectable job. And I think as a society, we have to work harder to change that, because I can promise you, as much as I love all of the doctors, the doctors of philosophy or education, none of them knows how to fix my air conditioner when it's 105 degrees outside. And so, just for the next generation, I want to shift that. And of course, we offer far more than the trades, but it's the idea of what are we telling our future generations, and what are we showing the generations who are looking for a change in life, or are looking for a change in career or an initial career.
Yeah.
I think that's all really important in the messaging. We have so much to offer.
Very true. And I think that we are just now, as a society, beginning to pivot back to this idea that there is honor in every profession.
Yeah.
And you're right. Many of these professions are very lucrative. You can make some money. You can live a great life, have a boat, or an ATV, or your truck, or
You get to play.
you get to be able to play. But that there isn't a one size fits all path for all students, and I think that, again, we as a society are beginning to recognize that and appreciate that there are different journeys, there are different pathways to being happy and to being successful.
Sure.
And I think we do a lot of that here at Fletcher. So on the opposite end of that, I know you do obviously a significant amount in helping students get initially enrolled to the college. But one of the things I know we are very focused on is making sure that you get through that journey. So you talked about passing the test, getting the first couple classes underneath your belt. On the opposite end, let me take you to the other side. So I know that you also are responsible for our retention of students and looking for ways to make sure that we're removing hurdles as they progress along their journey and helping students get to me, what's even more important than enrolling, which is completing, which is actually getting the degree or the credential that you came here for, making sure that you get to that point. So talk to us a little bit about what do you do, what does your team do to ensure students find success along the way and that they actually do get to walk across that stage, get that piece of paper that starts their new life.
Yeah. So I would say a big focus for us is the engagement piece, right? Engagement not only in academics, but in student organizations or in other opportunities to grow and develop as a leader while they're a student. Research shows, I know you know this, that students who are more involved in their education are more likely to be successful. And so it's important for us that we, if we can push or promote student organizations, that's kind of the low-hanging fruit, right? SGA or PTK or any of the groups we offer here on campus. That allows the student to engage, grow as a leader, and have opportunities to do service or community engagement. So that's one piece. But we also recognize that the education part of an education isn't the only hurdle. A lot of our students deal with so much more, with food insecurity, transportation issues, or inconsistent transportation, or just so many things, mental health. And so it's on us to try to identify services for those students so that while they're doing, we can't do the education piece for them. They have to come to class. They have to do the assignments. There's only so much. We can do some interventions, I'm sure, from an academic perspective, but when a student is hungry, that is the number one thing on their mind. And if you think about, for anybody, look, I never miss a meal. And if I have a say in it. But when I'm hungry, that is the thing I'm focused on. You're not going to get me to pay attention to anything else. And to the students who are dealing with that on a daily basis, right? I don't mean to flippantly say I never miss a meal. I understand that's a privilege, that some students would love to say they never miss a meal.
Right.
And so that's just one example. So we have our food pantry here on campus. We work with local community organizations to try to identify transportation support, housing support. I was just working with our Director of Student Affairs, Mr. Ethan Guidry, and I think our goal for his division is going to be to set up a bit of a storefront where students can come and shop for their needs. Maybe they come and shop for food. maybe it's clothes for an interview, but maybe they need transportation, or maybe they need mental health resources. And, for those of you who shop, I've never shopped at Costco, but at Sam's, when you go to the technology department and you want to buy a pair of AirPods, you don't pick up a pair of AirPods. You pick up a little cardboard box thing that shows a picture of AirPods, and you have to bring that somewhere, right, to get the actual AirPods. And so I was looking at Sam's one day, and I thought, oh my gosh, what if we had this cardboard thing that had a bus on it because a student needs to purchase, I use that in quotes. We try to provide those for free, of course, where possible. But what if they just needed to purchase a bus voucher? And they came and they took that off the shelf of our store. And what I hope, if we are able to pull that together, is that it's less, some students carry embarrassment with that. They don't want anybody to know they need that help. But if they're shopping for it and they're going to go check out, and at the checkout process, they schedule an appointment with Ethan to talk about transportation needs, maybe it helps to alleviate a bit of that because they're just in our store shopping. Yeah. And so just the effort to create a space where there's comfort, because I think students think they're the only ones. Yeah. How often do we come into things and think, oh, I'm the only one who made that mistake, or I'm the only one who carries this emotional back, whatever it is.
Right, doesn't know how to do something.
And in reality, if you felt comfortable enough to talk about it, you'd come to find that almost everybody has similar fears. And so, the goal in that, if we're able to provide that for our students, would be that they are just going shopping. They're just going shopping for their needs, and we can hopefully provide that for them.
I love the innovation of thinking about things and looking at things through our students' eyes. Sometimes because we've had experiences, you talk about that privilege. We've had the opportunity to go to college, and many of us multiple years. Yes. But to be able to step back and say, let me look at this from somebody else's perspective and try to answer their questions before maybe they even know the question to ask, or just to figure out how I can make this a little easier for them. And I do think that our team is really focused on doing that. Yeah. I want to come back to something you mentioned. You talked about SGA and PTK, and so for our audience who maybe aren't familiar with those, SGA is our Student Government Association. PTK is Phi Theta Kappa, which is our honor society. It's a national honor society for community college students. And I think sometimes when people think about community college versus maybe going to a university, one of the distinguishing factors that comes into play is this idea of student life. And that there maybe is a misperception that there is more student life, more activities at a university than a community college. I would argue that it probably looks differently. Yes. And it depends on the community college, quite frankly. I was going to say, at universities you have sports and athletics, but we have community colleges in our state that have baseball teams and basketball teams and have other sports. We have some of our community colleges around our state that have theater programs and music programs. And we have student life activities here as well. Absolutely. Can you talk just a minute about what types of organizations, like beyond the classroom, I am a student and I'm interested in those types of activities to make sure that I'm having a well-rounded college experience. What can I do here at Fletcher?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will be vulnerable, and I will say that has been a bit of a struggle on our side with so many of our students being online. Yeah. Right. We have fewer students here on campus. And so I would say that SGA, Student Government Association, and Phi Theta Kappa are our larger student organizations. And, we do have opportunities for students to create organizations. I know Ethan was just working to set up an esports, which is new to me. I am not as familiar. Me too. But, where there is a group of students who all have a shared interest, we can create something, right? And so I know we have organizations for our African-American students. We have a Black student union. So there's an opportunity there for those folks to come together. And it has, like I said, it has been a bit of a struggle to identify what people are wanting. I know Ethan is working really hard in our orientation sessions and when he's meeting with students to say, oh, if you have this interest, that's how esports came about.
Yep.
And so I think there's always opportunity. I agree with you that it probably looks a little different here. I think our student population leans a little more towards showing up, doing what they have to do, and going to work or taking care of their kids, whatever that might look like. But I do think that there is an opportunity for students. I think we probably have up and coming, probably a single mothers group. Yep. I know we have an individual who's identified as wanting to sponsor that particular group. And I think that's going to be really great. I think they're going to be able to come together and support each other, but also work within our community to support other single parents, right? So I say that I think there's a lot of opportunity for what can be done. And I'm really excited to see what Ethan has what he's pulling together with the individual student that he meets with, so that we can ensure we're meeting the needs of the students, because we want them to have that quote unquote traditional experience if that's what they want. Yeah. So it's the delicate balance there.
Yeah. And you talking about the different types of students that come to Fletcher, mm-hmm. The ability to find what I would call affinity groups.
Yes.
Right. So single mothers, mm-hmm. Those, I know we have maybe not official organizations, but we have groups of students based around their major or their program of interest. I get to attend nursing pinning ceremonies, and that group really becomes family mm-hmm. over the course of their studies and their programs. So maybe not necessarily an official student organization, but certainly a community that forms around either programs of interest or mm-hmm. like-minded activities, things like that. Yeah. That's all available here at Fletcher.
Yes. And I think we have an opportunity to be responsive to student wants and needs. Okay. I think at a smaller institution, we can stand up an organization fairly quickly, mm-hmm. And I think we can provide that personalized approach to the student success when it comes to being involved in leadership opportunities in a student organization.
Yeah. So great point. One of the things that I think is a hallmark of Fletcher that we're known mm-hmm. for, as well as many community colleges, is that responsiveness.
Yes.
Right? Is the ability to see a need mm-hmm. and run towards that need to figure out how we address that for community, for individual students. And so we know that working with our business and industry partners is really a cornerstone mm-hmm. of what we do here at Fletcher. And looking toward what our partners need in terms of the future workforce that they need to hire. In terms of just your interaction with and sort of your scanning the horizon on business and industry needs, how do you see Fletcher working with our business and industry partners to be responsive? What mm-hmm. does that look like in your area? And how do you think about what their needs are in terms of workforce and how that applies to your daily job?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in giving it a little thought, I think Fletcher does a phenomenal job of engaging with business and industry. I think there are so many partners in our community, and we are lucky to be able to work alongside them. We're lucky to be able to provide a workforce for them. I think, on the horizon, there are opportunities for business and industry to train their current employees. There's also a ton of opportunity for us to supply them with trained workforce. One of the things I think that's a little unique to Fletcher that we've done from an enrollment perspective and under your guidance and leadership, I think it's been a great idea of looking at how the enrollment process looks for a student who's coming to pursue the traditional credit-based program and those who are coming for a quick certification, right? It is not on the student to be able to tell us what certification, like I'm coming for this or that. It's for us to be able to guide them through that. And I think we've done a good job of giving the student an experience, giving our business partners the experience of helping them navigate what best fits their needs at that time. Because maybe we do have a welding student, for example. A company says, I have this individual who I currently employ or I want to employ, and I want to ensure they have the training necessary. We can provide them something in a few weeks that can get them back to that employer, and we can provide them something that takes about 1.5 years to complete. But it's not on them to determine that, right? It's for us to provide them with those opportunities and the information, right? Making an educated decision. And it's saying we can provide all of these things. You tell us what you want and we'll make it happen. And I think that's a bit of the secret sauce of Fletcher, if you will, that we want to remove those hurdles. And look, I'm sure every community college wants to remove the hurdles. Yeah. But it is really important for us to be responsive to not only individual student needs, but business and industry needs. If there's large training needs, if there's, smaller training needs, whatever that looks like, I think that is what makes us successful in our efforts to partner with our community. Because I say it's a no-brainer, but we are here to serve the community. As a community college, it's literally in our name. And if we're not meeting their needs, then we're not serving our community in the best way we can. Yeah. So I think that's really important.
And I think you're right. It goes back to a philosophy we adopted a number of years ago, which was we're supposed to be the experts in helping people navigate higher education. And so we have to stop expecting that our students are going to come into this institution knowing how to do that.
Right.
And, so to your point, that conversation, I remember sitting in that conference room and having the conversation about, I want students to be able to walk through the door and say, I want to be a welder, or I want to get a truck driving license so I can go drive commercial trucking. What degree, what credential, they shouldn't have to know the name of that. Quite frankly, we should be the group who figures out how they finance that. Yep. Right? So it's that start to finish, walking that journey with the student so that we can say to them, you don't have to have all the answers. That's why we're here.
It's literally my job.
Literally your job. You are right.
What the college pays me to do.
Yeah.
And so anytime they're like, oh my gosh, this is such a dumb question. It's like they don't even know how many dumb questions I've asked in my lifetime.
Exactly.
That it shows again that fear and uncertainty. And it's probably the thing that prevents people from walking through our doors. Yeah. Is saying, not only do I already feel like I don't belong there, but what if I don't use the right terminology? What if I say I want this kind of degree and they offer that kind of degree, right? And really, we have something here for everybody. I mean, that's what makes it easy to recruit. When I would in the olden days, when I would go out on the road and recruit, there wasn't anything a student could come to my table and say, I want to study fill in the blank, that I couldn't answer with something that they could do here at Fletcher. And, we have a great general studies option for students that in 2 years, they can get the first 2 years of a bachelor's degree or more done, or half the cost. Yeah. It's a small learning environment, which a lot of folks need. We have a lot of flexibility. And so look, as someone who was put out there to sell what we offer, in a sense, I really appreciate the opportunities that we offer because it makes that job so much easier. We really genuinely have something for everyone here.
Very, very true. And, as people are listening to this podcast, I hope one of the things that you're hearing come through is that we have established and built a team who is here to help you, who is here to guide you and be an advocate for you, and even anticipate the questions that maybe you didn't even know you needed to ask, right? Exactly. And so to take that first step, right? I know I've met students who have pulled onto campus, and when I finally meet them, as they're working through the enrollment, they said, I drove to campus 3 or 4 times and just parked in the parking lot, and I was too scared to go into the building, right? And so to take that first step, to just come into the building, sit with one of our folks in enrollment to get the information that they need. Sure. So I do want to talk a little bit about probably one of the biggest hurdles or challenges or issues for so many of our students in achieving their dream. And I think, it's finances. Yep. Let's just put it out there. It's money. Yep. And I think many people oftentimes do just what I said. They pull up, and one of the first questions that comes across their mind is, how am I going to pay this? How am I going to afford it? Many of our students, again, working full-time jobs, have families that they're trying to raise, trying to make ends meet. We know that it's a difficult economy for many. Groceries are expensive. Just everything seems to cost more. And so when you think about adding on tuition and fees, it can seem daunting.
Absolutely.
But again, one of the things I've learned, even from you over the course of the past few years, is that there are a lot of dollars out there for students to access to help them pursue these careers. We have grants, we have scholarships, we have the traditional Title IV aid. So let's talk a little bit about, I'm a student, how do I afford to come to college, right? You mentioned a minute ago, Fletcher is relatively inexpensive when you think about other options within higher education. So we are a great value for your dollar. But, for some students, that's still a lot of money.
Yeah.
So talk to us about, what's a conversation like with a student who's concerned about that?
Sure. Yeah. So definitely one of the larger hurdles, I would say, for students nationally is, how do I pay for this, right? And I think you hit the nail on the head that to some, a couple $1,000s a semester can be, that's not too bad. That's relatively cheap compared to others. Or it could be, I don't make that much money in 6 months, right? It could be that much of a difference. And so what we typically do is we always encourage students to complete the free application for federal student aid, also known as the FAFSA. And that will let us know just some general things about a student's eligibility for that federal aid. And so we accept, of course, the Pell Grant, which is free money. It is money that does not need to be paid back. But of course, we do offer student loans where you can borrow that money now. And then upon hopeful completion, you can then start, after obtaining a high-wage, high-demand job, you can start to pay that back. And so that is the more traditional path. It's the path we're going to encourage all folks to take, because if there's free money out there, that benefits you. Now, students obviously don't have to take out loans. There's never a requirement for that, but we can't see their eligibility unless they complete that FAFSA. So to all folks out there, I would say that is the number one step. No matter where you plan to enroll in higher ed, complete that document. We had, as if you've followed the news, there's been some hurdles around the FAFSA within the last year, but that I think is smoothing out a bit. And I do think that the new FAFSA is much more student friendly. It's a little less intimidating and faster, right? So, it was a little bit more difficult on the processing end for my team, but I do think ultimately it'll be great for students, and that's really, what matters. And so that's that traditional approach. We do also have students, a lot of our students utilize state funding, which would be TOPS, right? That's something that's been around for a really long time, and I am praying that it stays around for a long time so that my kids can hopefully utilize it. But a unique piece of Fletcher is that we can also accept TOPS Tech. And TOPS Tech is specifically used on technical programs. And really, that's almost all the programs that we offer. We do have a few outliers that would not be eligible for TOPS Tech funding, but that's something that can't be used at a university, right? And so I think that that's important to keep in mind. And other grants, right? And a grant is typically free money. And sometimes students, and it's okay, but sometimes students don't know that, right? You think, oh, I'm going to have to pay it back. Whatever it is, I'm going to have to pay it back. And so, there are lots of funding sources out there for students. If they meet certain criteria, that can be a little bit of a struggle. We also work really closely with the Louisiana Workforce Commission, especially around how to fund our workforce programs. So you mentioned our commercial vehicle operator program. Most of our students work with the Louisiana Workforce Commission, and that is, again, it's free money if you qualify, and you do, I believe, have to complete the FAFSA to determine eligibility for that. So I want to kind of drive that point home. FAFSA completion is really important, and sometimes we'll get special initiatives. We apply for grants all the time. And wherever possible, we try to make decisions that alleviate stress financially on students. Of course, we have scholarships. We have so many generous donors who have established scholarships with us. And students, it's a very simple application. We've tried to really, one of the things we decided as a scholarship committee was we were asking all these questions and, attach all these documents. And then we thought, why? What's our point in that? Is it just to see if a student can jump through hoops? And we really worked to refine that, because what it's about is the need. And it's about, maybe in some cases, it's about acknowledging merit, acknowledging great academic performance. Sometimes it's because someone's chosen a field and they have a passion for something. And we have a committee that looks at those applications and makes some decisions around that. And I know we're always working as an institution to see how we can enhance our scholarship offerings, because I do think it's a difference maker. Yeah. So those are the high level funding sources that come to mind. And we try to take what in higher ed and maybe in the corporate world as well, we try to braid the funding, right? I have to make that motion of braiding, where if you maybe get partial funding from the Pell Grant, and maybe you get TOPS and a scholarship, right? All of those things can come together to not only fund your education, but in some instances put money back in your hand. In the form of a refund, because a lot of our students need that money. If they're not able to work because they're in school, they might need that to live off of, or to just supplement if they've had to cut back work hours. And so, the money piece is of top priority for us, because we know it is about the time it takes to enroll in education, but it is a fiscal investment. And it is really important that we aid students in not incurring a ton of debt. Right. And I know our system has done so much work to not increase tuition, that we've tried to supplement in other ways. And I think that that's a really great thing we're offering to our community, because I can easily go out there and say, because it's true, we're half the price of a typical four-year institution or a for-profit institution, and you're still getting that same quality education for it.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, there's so much there. So I have to say, one of the first things that came to my mind when you were talking about the braided funding, and maybe I need to do this.
You just said braid funding.
The braiding funding. But, as I'm, as we're coming in right now, we're in the holiday season, right? And when we're taping this, but I love a store that allows me to stack coupons. Yeah. And so, this idea that we're going to help you find different pots of money to try to get you to the point where your education is free or low cost to you, it just brought to mind stackable coupons. And so I was like, oh my gosh, that's right. But that point that you drive home about the FAFSA is so important. And, I have 4 children. Some people say, oh, wow, Dr. Strickland, Chancellor Strickland, you have all of this education. And every year I dreaded doing the FAFSA. And it was hard, and I was confused. And I know that the federal government has done so much. So I think the first thing I really want to say to those listening is it is a different FAFSA. So even if you did it before when you were in college and now you're looking at doing it for your student or your child, or it's your first time, they have tried to make it a little bit easier and a little bit more student-friendly, right, in order to help facilitate people, completing that form. But they've also adjusted the timeline. So I do want to hit that real quick. So I believe that the FAFSA for next fall, is it already open?
It's open.
Yay, they did it.
They did it. Yes. And, one of the hurdles we faced last year when the Department of Ed was, look, this was a big undertaking on their part. And I understand there are going to be, different hurdles and issues that come, but I do think it'll be for the greater good. But one of the issues with the 24-25 FAFSA was that it was late being opened up. Typically, I think it would have been opened in October, and it kept getting pushed further and further back. And so for our upcoming, because I'm spitting out a lot of numbers, the 25-26 FAFSA is already open. And that's huge. And that is the FAFSA that's going to be used for any student wanting to enroll in summer of 2025, fall of 2025, or spring of 2026. So it goes to show you, to the listeners, that it takes some time to process, right? It's not click submit and it's done. And so if you can do it now, let's get it done. And we're going to start processing those as soon as we can.
Great.
But yeah, there is a timeline associated with it, and I am delighted to tell you that the 25-26 FAFSA is open. Great. Of course, the current FAFSA. So we're currently enrolling for spring of 2025, and that FAFSA has been open, you know, for a good while now. And that FAFSA would be, like I said, the 24-25 FAFSA. So it's very confusing, and oftentimes I find myself really quickly like spitting out, well, did you do your 25-26 FAFSA? And I see students, and I'm like, ooh. Okay, I need to slow down a little bit because there's a lot of numbers. But basically, when we award aid, we do it for summer, fall, and spring in that order. And so summer gets a little, some students use it as a header at the beginning of the year, some in the as a footer at the end. And so just, I think, educating students on that, it can be a little misleading from time to time. But
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think I answered your question.
Yeah, you did,
Okay.
for sure. And the other thing that I really hope our listening audience takes away as well, because I want to say from my own personal experience, mentioned the hurdles I had in trying to get across the finish line with the FAFSA. I more than once came into the college and said, help, I am raising the flag and saying, somebody help me figure this out. So if there's somebody out there and they open up that FAFSA and they just go, nope, and they close it back down, which is what I have done a number of times. So you are not alone out there. They can come to campus and get help, right? They don't have to do this by themselves.
No. And way back in the day when I was doing the FAFSA on paper, that hurts my feelings, right? It was paper. I didn't even have it online yet. I remember sitting with my mom, and I'm like, what's the answer for this question? And really relying on that additional support. And one of the ways they've done a really great job in refining it is you can tap into the IRS directly, so that all of the money questions, all of the questions about your income, and they just pull that from the IRS now. So you're not even having to do those pieces. To answer your question, absolutely, students can come at any point. You don't have to have an appointment. We will help you with FAFSA assistance. I'd also tell students, especially, if some students aren't doing their FAFSAs between 8 and 4, 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. And there's a very helpful FAFSA phone number that is escaping me right now in this moment. But they're very helpful, and they can absolutely, help with that. I would say I did do a FAFSA last year because I thought, it's time, Anna. You have to go through this just like our students are going through this. And you essentially create a username and a password.
Very common these days.
Please use an email address you check often, because they definitely are going to require that. But that's probably, if I had to say, if there's a difficulty, it's the setting up of the secure account, right? Because it does have to be a really locked down environment, because you're using personal identifying information, you're putting, money pieces and parts in there. And so they do have to have more security, which can be tedious, right? The two-factor authentication piece. Look at me. I said that word correctly. I'm so proud of myself.
Go you.
Thank you. But yeah, to answer your question, there's always support. And I think to you too, because you have come to me and shared like, oh, we did this child's FAFSA and there's an issue. In fact, just this past weekend, we were on LSU's campus and saw the FAFSA signs, right? Yeah. And my husband looked at me and said, that's gotta be you. Like, I'm not doing a FAFSA for one of these children. And I was like, it's okay. But I immediately thought to you, and I thought, oh, I hope I remember how to do it all by then. Because it can be intimidating. Yeah. And it's easy to say, oh yeah, go do your FAFSA and we'll process it. And we will. But it's not always that straightforward. And there are a lot of specialized situations. If there's an instance of, maybe a student is divorced and remarried, it's what income do I use? That's a really common question. And I think this new version of the FAFSA is really provided some definitions, and
Oh, good.
and tapping into the IRS retrieval tool allows to just use what you've put on your taxes, which is really what they want.
Yeah.
You know? And so that I think is going to be a really great benefit. So I'm really, once we've
Good.
ironed through all the wrinkles of the new implementation, I do hope what we see is a better user experience
Great.
for students.
Great. And always note that, again, as you said, no appointment needed. Just come on to campus and let us help you.
Yep.
I do want to take a moment, too, to highlight one of the other opportunities for funding for students that's relatively new,
Okay.
but directed toward our non-traditional students, and that's the MJ Foster Promise Program. We have seen significant success with that. Lots of students applying. I think, in fact, right now we maybe are out of money.
Yes. And that's why I didn't mention it before.
So I have it on good, reliable data that we are hoping to try to secure additional funding for those who have applied. But who can apply for MJ Foster? And if they want an opportunity to get some dollars in the next round, when do they need to apply?
So I believe the applications are it's kind of an ongoing
Rolling.
experience as far as I know. The student would literally just Google MJ Foster, right? Like that's probably the easiest. I can give you this rattled out long, URL to go to, but the students do have to apply separately for that funding source.
So separate from the
It's
FAFSA.
correct. A student needs to complete the FAFSA and the MJ Foster application. Now, I do believe that application is fairly simple and straightforward. It's, your own information you'd know about yourself, right? And it is a form of state funding, right? So it's the state that's providing that funding, and a student. So the state determines the eligibility, right? And now there are a few requirements. I know right now I want to say the student has to be 20, and the reason that I'm hesitant is because I think over the next couple years the goal is to lower the age, right? And but it is it's essentially TOPS for adult students, if that makes sense. So right now, if you don't use your TOPS eligibility, if you are eligible for it, right outside of high school or within that year, you lose it. Yep. And so I think if I had to correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was that the state said, well, what about the student who is a few years out of college and decides they want to go back, right? And so it has been a really great opportunity, and I'm hopeful that we can see it grow.
Yep.
And I'm hopeful that more of our students can be impacted by it. We have utilized all the funds for the year. Okay. And so there are no more funds at this point for us to offer students for our spring semester. And so that's something we're trying to sort through. We want to ensure our students don't have to sit out because of this funding shortfall. But we hope that that the state sees the applications, they see, or the number of applications, that they see the need, they see that the institutions and the students are utilizing it to fund their education. It is great in that it offers a little flexibility. And so to the listeners, just a high level explanation is federal student aid, which what people know as traditional financial aid, which is the Pell Grant and loans, can only be utilized for certain programs. Right. Which are more traditional credit-bearing programs. But it, at this point, can't be used for a student who wants a workforce certification. So two great examples are our commercial vehicle operator program is not Pell eligible, but it is MJ Foster eligible. Gotcha. And another is our certified line worker program. It's not Pell Grant eligible, but you can utilize some of those MJ Foster funds. And so always encourage students. I mean, every conversation that we're having with students, pushing that application, and hopefully we can see it balance out a little bit in the future. I know it took a bit to get it up and running, and now that it's running, it is sprinting. And so we just need to find a good, solid pace for that to be spent, and hopefully it can really make a big impact on our students.
Great, yeah. And I think Dr. Monty Sullivan, who leads our system, I think when we first started talking about this MJ Foster Promise program actually referred to it as Tops for Grown Folks.
Yeah. That must be where I got it.
Yeah, so absolutely. And by the way, if you haven't had a chance, Dr. Monty Sullivan was our guest for our first podcast of the Bridging the Bayou. So if you haven't had an opportunity to listen into that first podcast, please take a few minutes to do that. I think you will very much enjoy hearing his sort of thoughts on the community college experience.
Yeah, I will say just real quick, he was so good. My 12-year-old got engaged. Like I was listening, and so my 12-year-old asks me now, did the Bridging the Bayou podcast release yet?
Oh, fantastic!
And so he sat and he listened and he asked questions, and I thought, wow, this is this is great that I can listen with my kids in the car, and it fosters really thoughtful. We listened to all 3 that have been released. So shout out to all of those folks.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
so you've
wonderful.
got committed listeners.
And look, we are a podcast for every
Everyone.
age. Every generation
Everyone.
is going to get something here from Bridging the Bayou. Last but not least, I do want to just mention to our audience as well, Fletcher Technical Community College. In fact, the community colleges across the state of Louisiana have not raised tuition in a decade. So we continue to provide probably, I believe, one of the most affordable educational opportunities in our nation. And so if you are wondering whether or not you can afford to come back to get that credential or that degree, please know that we have an entire team who is here to help you access the funds that are available to you, and we really do want to help you. Before we wrap things up, and I'm going to end with a question. I love to find out a little bit about people and then maybe surprise you at the end with a fun question. But do you have a particular student story that you could share with us here that really maybe for you just brought home the difference that Fletcher can make in somebody's life?
I have several. And if I sat here, I'd think, oh, that one or that one. Miss Evanly Leray comes to mind. She and I worked really closely when she was trying to enroll here, and she overcame, several hurdles. And she shared her story about enrolling here, and now, she's in our nursing. She's completed, and so she's the probably one that rises to the top. We have another student who's gone through several of our programs who had gone through incarceration prior to enrolling here. That is a pocket of students I've really developed a bit of a passion around is our incarcerated individuals and those folks in reentry. I think they may or may not need the opportunity to truly, genuinely change their lives, and so that one was really one that stuck with me watching, and I don't want to imply that they had to overcome all these hurdles to enroll here. I think we do a good job of removing those hurdles, right. But just their mindset about themselves or their ability to complete our programs or just education in general was impactful. Those are the 2 that rise to the top. And later on, I'll think of another one. You know what I mean? After it's too late to share it
here.
Well,
look, we'll have to invite you back. That's what we'll have to do.
You can count me in.
So you've mentioned, funny enough, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this fact that you started out in interior design. And so quite a career shift. And for me, for those who are listening to this podcast, to hear that there is always an ability to try something new. There's always an ability to say, I want to change careers. I think, recent research shows that most people are going to change careers probably 5 times or more in their lifetime. And so for those individuals who are out there who maybe always wanted to be a nurse,
sure,
but chose a different path just because of life circumstance or just because they thought maybe they wanted to do a career. Again, I was listening to another podcast this morning and somebody said, I went to law school, I was a lawyer for 9 years and realized that I hated what I was doing. No offense to all the lawyers out there. I know some of you love it and are passionate about it, but I think it speaks to this idea that as we grow as people, sometimes our interests and our passions and what we want to pursue in life changes. And you've lived that journey as well. But I want to ask, because I think what's intrigued me about some of the things you've talked about today personally, interior design, watercolors. I've seen some of your artwork. I even know that you recently led like a paint and sip sort of party for some folks. Talk to me about creativity, and because all of those are very creative pursuits, whether they are for an employment reason or just for a personal passion reason. Why is creativity important? And I'm fascinated by this because in your role here at Fletcher, you mentioned before, it's a lot of numbers.
Yeah.
It's a lot of structure and organization, and yet you have this creative outlet. So why is creativity important in your life?
So I would say, and this might be a bit of a left turn, but I think the version of creativity that I most excel in, right? And there are people who, if you do different personality tests, we've done several where you can be, really think outside the box. And the unfortunate truth is that my brain is a box. I really struggle to step outside of the box. But I think the creativity can look a lot of different ways. It can be new ideas. I think where I've had opportunity is learning maybe how other colleges are doing things innovatively or in a different way. And then to bring it back to the hand motion of braiding it, braid those things. And I think that's probably a little bit more of the creativity that I more easily bring to work, right? To a professional, is to say, okay, I saw this really great thing that this college is doing to support students, and this college is doing something else. What if I could bring both and it looks a little bit different here? And I think creativity is also just about learning, about being open to other ideas. I think oftentimes, myself included, we can get really stuck in our ways. The whole idea of, well, this is how we've always done it. Yeah. And, I'm fortunate enough to work in an environment that allows me to try things out. And if it fails, it's not the end of the world, that we gave it a shot and we said we were going to try this. And if it supports our students, then great, we tried it. And if it doesn't, then that's okay, great, we tried it. And we know that it's okay that not everything sticks, and that fosters creativity. And so I think it's about, again, not to overuse it, but braiding and unique ideas or unique approaches with what's proven to be successful. I think that there's a balance there that has been helpful for me.
And sometimes it means taking some risks. And I bring that back all the way around to say, our students, by the sheer fact that they have taken a risk to be open to doing something different in their lives, are probably some of the most creative individuals around us.
And so courageous.
Yes.
And I think it's so easy for us to tell ourselves this story of like that's not a courageous thing to do, or that's not a creative thing to do. Like, oh, everybody does that. That's not creative. It is. And it's an opportunity to learn how to grow or develop that muscle, right? Because I can tell you, my brain is a box. I struggle to think outside the box, but then you surround yourself with people who are creative, right? You surround yourself with people who have the ideas, and maybe your strength is that you implement the ideas, but I think it's important to have all different types at the table and making that. And I think what that looks like for an individual is looking for wisdom outside of yourself, that it's okay that you don't know everything. And look, I'm saying that so that I can hear it too for myself, but that, we aren't going to all have it all figured out. But if you tap into the right people and you create a good supportive community, then the creativity is a little bit easier.
Oh, what a beautiful message. And I just take that to, what we do here at Fletcher. And for those of you who are out there who are maybe pursuing a degree or who are thinking about doing that, right? Doing that outreach, that supportive community, seeking that wisdom, the wisdom that's here, the wisdom that exists on how to get into college, how to pay for college, that exists right here on this campus. It's available to every single person in our community. So I hope that you will take that with you as we close out the podcast today, and know that there is an entire supportive community right here at Fletcher who's waiting to help you pursue your new career, or pursue your dreams. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to get to know you a little better and to also to hear about all the wonderful things that are happening here at Fletcher Technical Community College. I want to thank you all again for joining us on Bridging the Bayou, a podcast of Fletcher Technical Community College. I look forward to seeing you again as we release our next podcast in just a matter of a couple of weeks. Continue listening. Please find us, subscribe, and like us wherever you get your podcasts. So we're kind of new at this whole podcast game, and I really wanted to end each interview with a bit of advice from our guest. And so we did that for the first two. And oopsies, I missed the last one. So back with us for just a moment, Dr. Anna Nanny. What is your best advice you have for our listening audience today?
Thank you. That's a great question. And, I've given it a lot of thought because as an avid follower of the podcast, I was anticipating this question. And, I think probably the biggest piece is the remembering that the little things, and I'm still working on this, but remembering that the little things don't matter all that much. I think oftentimes we get so caught up and we spin around on, the little frustrations or the little anxieties. And at the end of the day, when you're on your deathbed and it's time to, take your last breath, I think those are the things that really you realize don't matter at all. And so, look, I'm still practicing it. It's not like I'm necessarily an expert at it, but it's been the bit of advice that has hit me the deepest, right? In realizing as we go through life, there are things that will matter and there are things that won't, and we can try to let those things go.
Great advice that I need as well. So hopefully going to make the little things a little bit littler in terms of the grand perspective.
There you go.
Thanks for coming back, and tune in next time. Thank you for listening to Bridging the Bayou, the podcast of Fletcher Technical Community College. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.